Hello and welcome back to Podcasting is Praxis. I'm David, my pronouns are he and him.
I'm Jamie, my pronouns are he and him.
I'm Rob, and mine are he and him.
And I'm Alistair, my pronouns are also he and him.
So yeah, hello, welcome back to this post-episode 200 episode. We live in a post-Justified world until they finally release this new fucking season.
Some people might call it 201.
Damn.
Some people might. They would be fools because there's other episodes that we don't technically count, so who can say what number it truly is. But yeah, so we're not going to talk about Justified anymore. That's probably a lie, but see how well we fucking stick to that. But we have more important things to talk about, and we've drafted in an expert in the form of Gareth, I'm sorry, I just completely fucking blanked on your second name. Oh, fucking hell, I wasn't looking at the right window.
We've dragged in some guy with a name.
There's a guy, he has a name, he's here. Yeah, my name is Gareth Dennis. My pronouns are he and him.
Oh, welcome here.
Which means you have to keep that in the edit now.
Yep, I do. Thanks for that.
I love it when a guest comes on and starts fucking with David. It's great.
That honestly, that just shows that you've got the vibe of this fucking down pat. So well done. Gareth, obviously we've got you on to talk about trains and train-related things, but unfortunately, Rob has to inflict a bunch of news on us first.
Yeah, before we get to our main topics, first, we've talked about on this podcast. We talked a few times about Freeport, one of my favourite little side obsessions. And on the
sick of fucking hearing about them, if I'm honest.
Well, it's too bad for you. You're still on this podcast. On the last premium episode, and this is a bit of a follow up for that. So if you're not a member, sucks to be you, and you should probably join the Patreon. Anyway, we've
probably joined the podcast.
Can you say what your name is and what your pronouns are in one go? Well, boy, howdy, we have a space for you.
I mean, as long as the Patreon money keeps flowing, I don't care who the fuck does these actual episodes. So, anyway,
Rob outsourcing live on the show, incredible.
If you can can you drop ship a podcast? Inquiring minds would like to know. Anyway, so on our last premium one, but also, you should have just read around, we talked about some of the strange dealings surrounding the Teesside Freeport in particular. And this is basically, as a very basic recap, Labour MP Andy MacDonald talked in Parliament about a very good article in Private Eye about some very odd property deals and allegedly the sale of 100 million worth of land inside the Freeport, the Teesside Freeport, for £100 to two of his mates who coincidentally also give him campaign donations. This is, we draw no direct parallels.
Wow, that's a Robert Pesto certified odd on that one.
Yeah, did I fade out of reality there for a second, or did you not mention whose mates they were? Because
I can actually, because
MP that brought up an article, but then you didn't
I can actually. So Labour MP Andy MacDonald talked in Parliament about this article in Private Eye about how Mayor Ben Houtchen, I don't know how you pronounce that, and I don't care to learn.
Houtchen.
What did I just tell you?
I don't care.
Basically, until he's also the head of the development authority in charge of the Freeport, and until December of last year, 50% of the Freeport was owned by the public and by the Teesside Valley Authority. And then, in a closed meeting with Ben Houtchen and some of his friends, they agreed to transfer 90% of those public shares. So overall, 90 or 95% of the total holdings to these two private guys, Ian Waller and Joseph Musgrave. Again, this is from the Financial Times and from Private Eye. And they sold that land to those two guys. And they're both, as it turns out, Tory donors. They've donated in total about £12,500 to various Tories, including £7,000 to Ben Houtchen himself. Now, of course, there's nothing going on there, and we are not, we're not implying anything. We're just stating an interesting series of events.
I mean, it would be a notable improvement would obviously be if this was done by a bunch of Labour donors. So
exactly. Yeah. Well,
think about that when you're voting at the next election.
Yeah. Or go back in time and change your vote at the council election if you really feel like it. Anyway, so as a result of all these shenanigans, there's been an interesting new development, which is that two of the major investors in the Freeport who actually want to build something there, BP and an energy company called Equinor, are both demanding new corruption-free clauses before they start building a giant new power station. This is incredible.
This is like when you have like a strongman competition and they have to specify it's drug free.
Yeah. This is from an article in The Telegraph. Tees Works directors are understood to have pledged that assets at the site had not been acquired because of an unacceptable act, nor have they hidden or dissimulated and will not hide or dissimulate the nature, origin, location, disposition, or ownership of the assets, rights, or values.
That's a hard. Like the questions I have are answered by the T-shirt type situation, isn't it?
The warranties, so these side contracts of you guarantee to us that this is not a corrupt sinkhole, are also believed to state that the if it turns out that there is any hypothetical corruption, then the Teesside Valley Authority would be on the hook for paying out BP and Equinor to get out of these contracts and presumably some level of damages. So it's
that
really
sounds fine. I'm sure they can afford it.
It's truly a good sign of your Freeport project.
Would that not be a public liability though? Again,
it would be, yeah.
Even then, it'd be the public, not the private corrupt individual. Potentially, not necessarily, in Minecraft, corrupt individuals who are involved in the process. So it's a lose-lose situation for us, the people.
I mean, I don't know.
Now you're thinking with PFI.
I mean, it's an interesting question, Gareth, because I don't know, legally speaking, whether or not these liabilities are personal to the directors of the Tees Valley Authority or whether they are, limited to the Tees Valley Authority itself. It depends on the legal form, I think, of the authority, but let's basically assume that, that Ben Houchen, if there were to be corruption, could get away with it.
That one, yeah.
But like the remarkable thing about this whole sort of side note is that it is really a very remarkable state of affairs when BP, the oil company, is saying to you, we think you're corrupt and this is a bad idea.
Yo, this shit's a bit fucked up, don't you think?
Ethics lessons from BP is really an incredible sign of the times. Although I will say...
I've got to ask, before we move on, are we allowed to invoke in Minecraft for libel now, as well as for threats? Because that's pretty cool.
No, there were not, but there was a lot of ifs there, which technically make it fine.
Too late.
Yeah, not hypothetical. We were abstracting the characters in this piece and projecting them into a hypothetical story, a fiction, you might say.
My not committing large-scale fraud diamond breastplate is raising a lot of questions.
Whatever the answer to Jamie's question just there was, he's already written it down, so I wouldn't worry about it.
I mean, although I will say that the project BP and Equinor are involved in is to build a giant new gas-powered power station with an attached carbon capture and storage site. So, whether
I love a
yes, we love them.
Hooray!
Apparently we're gonna pipe all the CO2 offshore into an empty oil field, and I can't imagine that the offshore oil field at the gas site that we're gonna pump all the CO2 in is called Endurance. So I have no further questions.
Just going to anger the old ones, are we?
Or we're going to make them bigger. It's like a balloon. It's like one of those CO2 canisters for really rapidly doing a bunch of balloons. It's like we're just going to inflate a great old one like a pufferfish.
This is literally the plot of that awful Amazon series, The Rig.
Is it?
It is.
I've got to say, I got very briefly excited when Rob said, they're building a large gas power, and I thought, what could it be? There's loads of things you can power with gas in a power plant. For fuck's sake, do you know what I mean? I thought maybe a giant one of those guys that dances outside of car sales rooms.
Like a giant inflatable Rishi Sunak.
That would be incredible, though.
A whole 6 feet tall.
Yeah. That's where all the money of the
three times scale.
That's where all the leveling up funds went to, like, this giant, wavy guy from outside a second-hand car dealership.
In a high wind, it just bends completely over and sinks ferries.
Anyway, on to something completely different. This is something, Alistair, you sent to the podcast. There's a good new survey out in the US of, like, office job workers that, on average, they do, like, 10 hours a week of what the survey called productivity theater.
This is fantastic because what we need is.
I am the Laurence Olivier of productivity theatre. I'll tell you that.
What we need is for the workplace to be more like a fucking boarding an airplane.
Yeah. Or just show up to the office one day wearing a big ruff and holding a skull and just, like, running around seeing what happens.
I'm classically trained, don't you know?
I say as I enter in my blobby outfit.
Basically, like, they surmise that why are people engaged in 10 hours a week of productivity bullshit, and that's because, like, the economy is bad again and people are being fired.
Jobs are a load of fucking bullshit.
Yeah, that's the point they're missing. It's just like, no, jobs are bullshit, and, like, it's, yeah. But they're saying now, like, a lot of people are getting fired, especially in, like, San Francisco and, like, Meta and stuff. So everybody is, like, just doing what they called performative work, which is stuff that makes you look busy without actually doing anything, just so, like, your middle manager can see you doing thing.
That one guy at Tesla whose job was just to run a Matrix code screensaver whenever Elon Musk walked by.
Yes. Our hero. This is from the article. Common performative activities include responding to emails or messages unnecessarily quickly,
Do you want the work done or not? What the fuck, make your mind up.
Scheduling emails or messages for the future.
Oh, fucking hell.
I'm going to reorganize my workplace and just bury, like, a series of time capsules in my lawn and then just say, look, I've been really busy.
You're missing the most important one at the end there, though, Rob.
Yeah.
Attending unnecessary meetings.
Yeah.
Where I would like to raise a point of order that all meetings are unnecessary.
Yes. I mean, yeah, no, there's no point at most meetings. You could just, like, you might as well send another unnecessary email and just get on with your day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the thing about an unnecessary email is they're a lot easier to ignore.
Yeah, or to respond to very quickly with more unnecessary emails. Yeah,
I'd love to be the guy that responds to unnecessary meetings very quickly.
Just bolting into the meeting room.
As soon as you get the invite, just in case.
Yeah, anyway, so apart from all work being bullshit, life in the UK also still bullshit. I know that's kind of a theme of this podcast in general. There was an incredible, well, it was more fun in the headline than it was in the reading, although there was some good bits in there. There was an incredible piece in the Sunday Times this weekend by a guy called Ali Hussein. The title was 200k a year and struggling. Affluence isn't what it was.
What's the opposite of an erection? Because I have that right now.
Centrism.
Subtitled, want to get married, have 2 children, send them to private school, live in a nice house, take 2 foreign holidays a year and shop at Waitrose, then you will both need to earn more than 100k a year.
Okay.
What if I don't want to do those things?
Yeah.
Then you shouldn't be reading the Times, I'm sorry.
You've been consigned to the
Deal.
pit.
Anyway, so they actually got some fucking number one consultancy to do some basics on it. So like I said, 200k pre-tax, which leaves you with about 150k a year post. So that's more than £10,000 a month that you bring in clean. So these are some of the expenditures that they calculate per month. So about 750 quid a month just on groceries, so like food and drink alone, 800 on pensions, £3,800 a month on public school fees.
To be fair, that's about the same as regular childcare, as I'm finding out with our wee one. So I can kind of be like, oh yeah, that's just regular childcare. That's how much it costs for childcare these days. Thanks to the government's obsession with just funding that industry without growing its capacity. That's one for another episode.
Yeah, I really want to do an episode on like childcare costs and stuff, actually, because it's fascinating. I know that their latest thing was just like say, oh yeah, if you want to look after like very small children, you don't need any qualifications anymore. Like you can just go ham, essentially. Like
the Tories have managed to create a private school system for preschoolers just by they've just managed to create that in like a decade. It's quite spectacular, really.
Well, Gareth, what you need to do is you need to flip it on its head and send your infant to Eton.
That would do it. Yeah, that would do it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You're
Be
very
Prime
small.
Minister within 10 years.
Yeah, that's it. Fast track.
You do have to give your child some absurd, like, double-barreled name, or, like, does your child have, like, the name of a horse already? Because then, like, they're already two or three steps ahead. A couple consisting of a dentist and an NHS ophthalmologist said, so this is people that they interviewed, which is incredible.
Rob, you missed out the $3,000 a year on private healthcare, thing that everyone in this country needs.
Yeah, that everybody, of course.
All I'm hearing right now is that...
It's fucking getting that way.
Yeah.
All I'm hearing so far, though, is that rich people's lives would also be incredibly improved with communism.
Yeah. Everybody's lives would be.
Give it a try. We promise it will work out.
Also, I've got some advice, some financial advice for them, which is cut the public school fees and cut the private healthcare, and you'll be swimming in it. Like, it's easy. Don't send your kids to private school.
Buy less candles.
What if they saw a poor person?
Oh, that's it. That's the problem, isn't it? These people would be not struggling if they simply did not spend money on making their children into an elite blank slate to be turned into an automaton.
What they should do is you should give me all of their fucking money and then sign on. Miles happier, I guarantee it.
Or Jamie, what you could do is open a private school yourself. And then
sounds like work, to be honest, mate.
A couple consisting of a dentist and an NHS ophthalmologist said they had to make cutbacks despite having a joint household income of £205,000. The couple, who do not wish to be identified,
fucking don't.
one never. Have children aged 16 and 14, and school fees were £3,100 a month last year, going up to £3,400 in September. Last year they were a little bit less, blah blah. There's just not enough wriggle room anymore, said the ophthalmologist. It may be hard to feel sorry for people in our position, but we are used to a particular lifestyle and are now forced to make changes.
I know people who
jump in there and say, like, so that's gone school fees that they don't need to pay anyway because all private schools should be abolished. But like that's a 13% ish rise in the fees. The cost of basics, the cost of food basics, has increased by like 200 to 300% because of the changes that supermarkets have made to the way that they sell like the cheapest food products. So like they're moaning about the type of life they've got, and people literally can no longer afford to like actually afford to pay for food. Putting aside all the food bank stuff, it's incredible. This is this is table stakes. I'm getting wound up by an obvious baiting table stakes piece.
Yeah.
When you juxtapose those two things, though, I come up with a potential solution.
Is it Soylent again?
Soylent, yeah. Hitchcock pulling his ropes with the guillotine behind him in Minecraft.
The couple who
you do have to feel for them though, adjusting to this lifestyle change. Can you imagine how many bees are left on their windowsills now?
It's crazy that there are couples in London who have been hit with a bigger rent increase on like the same base rate, like 3,100 a month in London. Like, oh no, my children have to cost slightly more to send to school, which is a fraction of our monthly income.
Yeah, but the crazy thing is these people don't even live in London. The couple who live in the northeast of England have cut back...
Oh my god, yes. Where house prices are like a sixth of what they are in London, if not.
I presume that's why they haven't.
Prices.
I presume that's why they haven't even included that in the monthly expenditure, like mortgage / rent.
Right. They just don't it outright.
Yeah.
Have cut back on holidays, so take only one a year, costing about £7,000.
What?
Are they going to the fucking moon?
That's the cost of a Virgin Galactic ticket right there.
Yeah, they take that space rocket that ends up like sticking out of the eye of the moon. It's
Wish it was a fucking one-way rocket.
But don't worry, it gets even worse and sadder. Their children take packed lunches to school, and they have not...
Oh, Christ.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, let's just baseline that. That's fine. I took a packed lunch. I used to have, like, you know, the yogurt, bananas, and whatever it was that Mum used to get and put in my packed lunch. That was fine. I'm sure that that's a quite reasonable expense for them. It's not going to be an enormous amount of money for the packed lunches. Sure.
Yeah, but like if they take a packed lunch to school, then you know, like Miffy pederast will bully them, or you know, whatever pricks they go to school with. And they have not replaced their 2 cars for almost 10 years. I mean, truly, this incredible. Look, this whole piece is obviously like just massive fucking bait, and we all know it. But like, if you want to take a,
it is. We're all suckers. Okay, fine.
But
but there's sometimes you get a delicious worm in exchange.
But like, if you want to take like a broader point from this, apart from that, we should just eat these people or put them in a re-education camp. It's just like that. Even these people, because they're, apart from like this specific example, they did do like some general like number crunching that like this lifestyle that these pricks have would, in taking into account inflation, all that stuff, would have cost about £92,000 a year in 1985. But now it's over
money.
Yeah. But now it's over 200k. So like, even if you're in this lifestyle, like, you need twice the money just to keep up with like what your parents were doing. So like,
this is you're right. It is an absolutely key point because the reality that, I mean, it's the same in the US, but potentially to an even more extreme. Britain is a poor country that has extremely rich people living in it.
Yes,
in a few places. Like this is and what's funny is that the bar at which actually not rich is sitting is, as you say, it's like moving upwards exponentially. These people are all just going to move out to Abu Dhabi and Dubai. That's basically if they can, they're just going to move to Dubai. Which, in some cases that's great, but you're right. It's very interesting that Britain is really we're raising the bar, and that bar is the line at which people are in poverty.
100%. Well, I didn't mention it because I just wanted to skim this article essentially, but it also goes into like, basically it says that more and more people are like relying on money from their parents or like inheritances from grandparents to like keep the lifestyle going. Like, I mean, look, these people don't feel sad for them for a fucking second because they earn 200k a year, but like, you have 1 or 2 more generations of that kind of inheritance and, that kind of leftover class stabilization. And then, like, that's gone too. And then it's all just sucked upward into, high finance in the hands of fewer and fewer people. It's like, I don't know, it's something capitalism.
It sounds like one of those, I think it's called an inherent contradiction, something like that. I've been hearing a lot about these lately.
Yeah. So what I do find interesting is like these people are obviously like either they're upper class or at the very top end of the middle class, depending on how you draw your, I don't know whether your official bounds are drawn or where you draw your personal lines, but it's like these people, like, again, don't feel sorry for them, but they can't, if these people can't keep up, like,
exactly. People are on minimum wage, on pro rata salaries that are less than the minimum wage annually.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that we've got an economy that's kind of currently reorganising itself to service only people who are in that economic bracket.
Yeah.
So the economy is reorganizing itself to only, like the provision of food at supermarkets is a good example. Supermarkets are no longer providing the cheapest tin of soup or the smallest unit of a multi-pack. Everything's in larger and larger quantities. They're getting rid of the Tesco value thing, and they're increasing the number of like high value, like 4 cookies in a packet that costs £8 type situation.
Tesco finest cookie, yeah.
Yeah, they're reordering the economy to very much facilitate the people who we've just talked about, and even those people can't afford it. So it's just think on anyone who's kind of earning anything in the region of 20, 30k or less. And 30k used to be my graduate salary when I started was 25. That's if you're on 25 or less, you're really struggling. If your household income is 25 and you've got a kid or two, not really viable.
No, good luck. No. So, like,
something just when we're actually talking about the food prices and stuff, something I've noticed recently is a lot more shops are doing the Tesco Club Card type deal, where if you give us a bunch of your personal information, we'll make things slightly cheaper for you, and it's very fucking insidious that happens now. Well, the prices are going up like fuck. It's horrible.
Yeah, very sinister.
Yeah. Anyway, so having discussed briefly all of that, Gareth, we mainly brought you on because, like I said at the intro, we have the occasional fascination with public transport. And one of the things that I've been like trying to wrap my brain around for like a very long time, but quite frankly, I'm too scared of it, is like HS2, because basically every time I read anything in the papers about HS2, or it seems to like get smaller, but also more expensive, and everything gets like significantly more stupid.
It's called the Edinburgh tramification process.
So you want to build a railway in Britain?
I mean, God, where do you want to start?
Just
because good God, is it a rich seam to mine?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, just like some recent events. I think the latest one I saw was that the government was denying they were going to end HS2 basically in a field outside London instead of the London Euston terminal that's already being built for like I think £5 billion or something is the current money on it. Although that was money from once again our friends at the National Audit Office came up. Shout out to our pals. They were warning in a report in 2020 that the HS2 terminus just for London Euston had doubled in cost since 2020. It now costs about 4.8 billion. This included at least 100 million's worth of work that had to be written off after they scrapped the original designs and just, I don't know, I guess started afresh or something.
Pretty much, yeah.
These motherfuckers literally are building infrastructure like I play video games with trains in them.
Okay, yeah. All of this news. I mean, there's still more. I'm sure you're going to go through, but like, and we'll circle back around to this. But all of this news should be framed by the fact that we have a government who does not want to build this project. So if you see all of this news in that context, it makes a lot more sense. Like, just picture it like someone who's got an axe. They're in a living room and they've decided they don't like their living room anymore, and they don't have to pay to fix it. They're just swinging the axe around and smashing stuff. That's basically what's happening here.
But is that like new? Because from everything I understood from my reading of it, is like at least under Boris Johnson, because he was a man who loved mega projects, that there was some enthusiasm for this.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Right. Let's and we'll come back later to why HS2 is good and what the point of it is. But in terms of why it's currently being screwed over, I'll paint a bit of a picture for you. So the project was inherited, and we'll talk about the history of it. I'll tell you what. Let's do the history now. Let's talk about where the hell did this project come from? Why does this government hate it, as I've just said, and who and why has it come about in that case? So right, the jump back. You've talked about the West Coast Main Line in a previous episode. Well, the West Coast route modernisation that kind of gave us the what was a good service on the West Coast Main Line isn't anymore because of Avanti. But before that, what was a pretty good service. Was as a result of what, in today's money, was £25 billion worth of investment in the existing network to upgrade the West Coast Main Line. That project was an unmitigated disaster because it was supposed to deliver 140 miles an hour, full digital signalling, like automated trains running, all sorts of stuff that it did not deliver. It delivered 125 mile an hour railway with tilting, and it delivered not quite the number of trains per hour. It delivered it failed to deliver, but it did increase capacity or increase the number of seats per hour by about 3 times. before the project was even signed off by our friends at the NAO as being finished, all of those benefits, all those extra seats were filled by new passengers because there was an enormous latent demand for people to just use the train.
Yes.
So as soon as they provided that additional capacity, the seats were filled up.
This is
so
like the what's it called again? The Elizabeth line. That's like already at 300% of estimate because everybody just wants to take the tube instead of
build. People want to take the fucking train.
People are crying out for trains.
Yes. You can just go on, you can fucking doom scroll. You don't have to worry about crashing into a kid on their bicycle because you can doom scroll and you don't have to hold the steering wheel at the same time. It's perfect. You know,
Keir Starmer hates it.
This is what the people want. Yeah. In Minecraft. Yeah.
President Xi, my people cry out for high-speed rail, yes.
I mean, you're going to call anyone then.
Sorry, anyway, Gareth,
Anyway, so you had this massive project that was basically enormously more expensive. Like, it was triple the budget. It was immediate. All the benefits were immediately absorbed, and people were like scratching their head, like, that wasn't great. Also, it destroyed Railcraic, like among other things, like the Railcraic murdering a bunch of passengers. It destroyed Railcraic, which was the previous the private company that owned the railway.
Oh yeah. I remember reading about them.
Rail, which is a public body. Yes, exactly. So the railway, it's funny, when people say nationalise the railways, well, actually, the railways are nationalised. They are owned by Network Rail, which is just a part of the DfT. Anyway, put that to one side. So, sunk Railtrack was a mega disaster. The new Labour government at the time, Adonis was actually, for various things on transport, had his head screwed on. So he kind of put electrification back on the agenda, for example, and he also said, we actually need a high-speed line. We need a high-speed line going to relieve the West Coast Main Line, but also to absorb like a much longer-term leap in capacity on the rail network, and also to allow, as I'll talk about later, like, all the other benefits as well, which we'll come back to. We'll circle back around to that later, but we'll stay on history for now. So, project initiated by New Labour between 2007 and 2009, was officially kind of said this is a thing in 2009, 2010. Funnily enough, then, G. Brown did his funny smile, called a woman a bigot, lost the general election. We have the coalition government. Coalition government, kind of broadly similar political stripe, frankly. So they continued with it. You know, the Osborneomics, apart from being really vigorously pro-austerity, although Labour were basically taking that stance anyway, running up to the 2010 general election, they basically picked it up as it fitted within the picture of Osborneomics of being like a bit of a growthy type thing. It was infrastructure, it seemed like a good idea, so they kept going with it.
Yeah. I mean, and it was, I think, at this point already a bit like closer to like is shovel ready, right? They'd already done the designs and stuff. It was,
so you have to remember, as someone who does this as my day job, a railway doesn't appear out of scratch, and any big project, you have to spend about 20% of this. Yeah, I know, right? It doesn't just appear out of thin air. People have to design it, and it's a hugely complicated thing to design a big railway like this. For all sorts of reasons, we made it really even more complicated by the fact that we did it as one massive project rather than a series of individual schemes aiming towards a target. But we can come back to why that is one of the reasons why Britain screws this stuff up all the time. So we end up with HS2 getting developed into the Y shape that we know now, which was starting from London, running up to Birmingham, splitting one direction going to Scotland via the northwest, and the other direction going to kind of Newcastle via and kind of Teesside via Yorkshire. So you have this kind of splitting Y that's split in the Midlands and connected the East Midlands and Yorkshire down to the West Midlands, and then up to Manchester and Glasgow the other end, running on the existing network north of Manchester, basically. So that was the proposal. It also had a connection to HS1, although that plan was a bit rubbish, to be honest, so that was always going to kind of fall.
Yeah, but that one...
It got developed, reached 2016... And sorry, go on. Yeah.
I think that bit between where they were going to connect, like they were going to run HS2 through London to connect to HS1, which is the Channel Tunnel. It's the Eurostar, essentially.
It was always a rubbish. Yeah, it didn't make any. The way they proposed it didn't make any sense. There was the original plan for, because fun enough, a high speed. This wasn't the first time that we'd reached the point where there were serious talks about creating a high speed line like this. We were in exactly the same position in the late 80s and early 90s, where almost exactly the same line was being proposed then. The early 90s recession put paid to it, but the original plans then were for a through station, basically what is now St Pancras kind of Eurostar terminal, was going to be a through station connecting up to the high speed line, connecting one direction going down to the Channel Tunnel.
Right, cool.
Going toward so that was the original plan. A certain Jeremiah Krobnins didn't like that plan. He was the MP for that area, as he still is, and weirdly, our special boy wasn't a huge fan of the proposals, and it was easy. It made it easy politically because they were also very expensive to put it to one side, and the government kind of pulled the Channel Tunnel rail link at the same time anyway. So, and also pulled the high speed line. So it all collapsed into nothing. And then we ended up with using St Pancras. We ended up with HS2 kind of taking until basically 2016 was the point at which the current proposals were kind of finalised. And that was the end of by that point, the coalition government had sacked it in. And we eventually got to, so Theresa May, basically indifferent, was totally preoccupied, an utterly useless government. And it only got worse. Boris came in. It's interesting you say Boris likes his big infrastructure projects. Boris brought in a chap called Andrew Gilligan, who's a vampiric right-wing libertarian lunatic who's now back at his comfortable home at Policy Exchange.
I was going to guess IEA, but I'll take Policy Exchange.
Close, yeah, very close. Very much cut from the same silk. So Andrew Gilligan, much as he's won his way into the hearts of the libs by pretending to be a pro-cyclist guy, he hates railways. He's one of these rip them all up and turn them into bus lanes type guys.
2 wheels, fine. More wheels than that. 4, also okay. More wheels than that. Oh, careful now.
Exactly, yeah. So he hates railways and particularly hated HS2, and he initiated the Oakerview Review, which was a review which started the problems we've got at Euston, because it changed the plans at Euston from being a 2-stage station where you build a bit of the station so you can start the service early, and then you build the rest of it to coincide with the rest of the rail being built. In inverted commas, made it cheaper, which, as the NAO have told us, wasn't true, to turn it into a 1-stage station and just build the whole thing at once. That was obviously a stupid idea. But that was the beginning of things getting worse and worse for the project, because then they started slashing. You had the integrated rail plan, which was an absolute shambles of a proposal, because what it said was, well, instead of delivering this new high-speed infrastructure that was the whole point, we're actually going to do more West Coast route modernisation type projects instead, because those were so successful last time.
I think this was also the integrated rail plan was also the point where they said, actually, maybe we don't need the leg to Leeds or something, right? I think that's when they started hacking off
so they just entirely got rid of that and said that they'll deliver that as that they would deliver it, but it would be with on-network, existing network upgrades, which, as I've discussed a bit with West Coast Route Mod, is exactly the wrong thing to do. You make everything worse by doing that. And in explaining why HS2 is a good idea, which we'll do in a minute, I'll explain why replacing it with just upgrading the existing network is such a bad idea and defeats the whole object. So anyway, in terms of you're exactly right. Integrated rail plan, they chopped the section to Yorkshire, which I would argue is the most important bit of HS2. And then also, having done the integrated rail plan, they then added an extra chop, which was the connection that brought the high-speed trains back onto the West Coast Main Line to head to Scotland.
Yes, yeah.
That goes through Graham Brady's patch, his constituency. That was specifically a bribe for Boris Johnson to attempt to remain Prime Minister, which didn't obviously work out for him anyway. And I will just say this: that was a bribe. Come for me, legal people. That was a bribe. The UK is fundamentally a corrupt country. Anyway, so that kind of brings us up to today, really, where government is continuing to slash it as much as they can. They're umming and ahhing about what it'll do in Manchester, or if it'll even go to Manchester. They're umming and ahhing about how it connects to the West Coast Main Line at all. They're umming and ahhing about. They're basically they're ripping up as much of it as they possibly can to just slash it apart, so that when Labour pick up at the next general election, it's very difficult for them to do anything with it. They're trying to scorched earth HS2 essentially.
But I mean, apart from the Tories just liking, I suppose, not any kind of serious state building, basically, or state capacity building, or showing that the state can be functional or anything, is it just because I've always wondered, because you see sort of these different strains of opposition to HS2, there's just, the car psychos, which is the Top Gear people who are just gone anyway. Is it just countryside Tories who have an objection to new rail coming through, I don't know,
I think
parts of the Cotswolds?
The Top Gear people should be forced to live on a motorway.
Yeah, they should have to. You should put all of them in the house on the M62 that's between the two sides of the motorway. Just all of them have to live in that house. There's an interesting and bizarre coalition of opposition to HS2, because the opposition to HS2 has been on a bit of a journey. So it started out when it was just a policy discussion before there were actual plans on the table. You mentioned the IEA. They were the kinds of people. So the Institute of Economic Affairs, Taxpayers Alliance, Policy Exchange, those sorts of kind of vampiric psychopaths were the ones, the policy wonks. Yeah, absolute pricks. They were the ones who were fixated on, it was a policy opposition stance, and so it was they were able to kind of paint lots of libertarian kind of descriptions of why it's a bad thing. Those were fairly palatable anti-arguments for the Chiltern Tory NIMBYs to then pick up. The green-fingered Tories in the Chilterns who would be impacted on it. So as the project started becoming a real thing, the rich NIMBYs who have plenty of time in their hands because they don't have a real job had plenty of time to build up opposition groups, Interaction Alliance, and stuff.
Your sort of countryside alliance freaks, basically.
Exactly. They have plenty of time in their hands. They picked, and for them, it's very natural and a comfortable fit to pick up those libertarian arguments. So they kind of picked them up, and they kind of got their grubby hands on them, quite literally. They kind of slightly environmentalised them, but in a very, as you say, countryside alliance kind of way. The trouble is, rubbing shoulders with those folks are also a bunch of Green Party people and Lib Dems who live in those areas, who kind of then transmutated those arguments into being slightly more environmentally focused. So then you started getting more discussions about woodland, more discussions about habitat impact. Don't get me wrong, HS2 has an impact, but its impact is like the size of one golf course. It's trivial, and the comparison, and even when you go and stand and look at the visual impact, it's like, okay, yes, that's what that looks like. For me, who grew up in Scotland, seeing industrial forest agriculture, I have to say, not particularly phased by seeing a small piece of woodland fell. Whereas people in the Chilterns who've literally never seen a telegraph pole get raised are perhaps slightly more horrified when 3 trees get chopped down. But when you live near Benahee and you see entire faces of hillsides just getting absolutely stripped of forestry, you just don't. You get a bit. You perhaps see things slightly differently. Anyway,
but Gareth, I don't think you understand. For those people, that's their sacred grove where they do the child sacrifices, and they're very difficult to give up. And what if they anger their gods?
This is it. That's it. If they anger their pagan gods.
This is why you can never run into the Orkneys, because at that point, all hell will actually break loose.
Oh yeah, well, in the Orkneys, they just set fire to everything, uphill, etc. Right. So you get. So then there's this transition where it goes towards the Green Party, and the Green Party start picking up, running it, and then it continues to transition, and starts taking on a bit of a left wing bent in the form of groups like Extinction Rebellion taking a really hard anti-HS2 stance.
Yeah, why? In God's name did they? Because
baffling and puzzling.
Presumably it's the same people who fucking glued themselves to that train that one time.
Yeah. Well, it comes from the same position. I think it comes from the same mindset, which is just thinking. I think partly it's that baton race of the way the message has been handed from the opposition, from different types of the opposition, is that it's sort of sterilised and sanitised that. And you end up in the situation where Extinction Rebellion people are repeating lines from the Taxpayers Alliance, which is obviously bonkers.
But it's that kind of...
and that's not to dismiss. There are other people who've come to opposition more organically, but a big core of the opposition has come on that journey. Has come on that weird journey.
A lot of those people are the same kind of people with soup for brains that are scared of atoms if you say nuclear power too loudly.
Correct. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. And there's the Green Party is currently on a bit of a journey of changing its stance on, because the Green Party, they support high speed rail, but they just don't support the only high speed rail project that currently exists and ever will exist. They want more trains. They do not want more tracks. So anyway, that's the shape of the opposition, so this is a strange sort of variety of people who I find myself shouting at. At the moment, I spend most of my time shouting at the kind of the left wing and the green opposition, because frankly, there's no point bothering with the right wing opposition. They're a bunch of vampires, and they will not be convinced. And there's no need to. The thing that cuts to my soul is having arguments with socialists, or at least with leftists, who are opposing the project on the basis of there are good arguments against HS2, but they're never made. They are never made. The arguments that always get made are the ones that have been debunked repeatedly, how much woodland it impacts on, or it won't be carbon neutral for 120 years. These are fundamentally untrue arguments. That it's really frustrating to have to bat them back from otherwise kind of left-minded folks.
So so is this? Is this a thing? Like, is the HS2 like still a thing that's like fundamentally worth doing, or are we now like at a point where we've spent, all the money on? Not that the government can run out of money, etc., but like we've spent all our money, I assume, on some very expensive consultants, and although there are some very cool drills currently running around doing, making holes in hills. So like, is this like still a thing that is worth doing, or should we just say like, well, we have this gigantic wad of money and let's presume that the government doesn't give it away to their mates, but like would we just be better off like paying for an upgrade to existing rail infrastructure?
Yeah, so there's a few things to dig into there. I suppose the first is that to build the ideal version of HS2 requires the bits that we're building now anyway. So off the bat, yes, finish building the thing we have now. The second thing is talking a bit about the construction industry, because it's an interesting argument I often get of people who say, well, all this money's going to this construction contractor is a Tory donor and this construction contractor is a Tory donor.
They're all Tory donors. They're construction
they're
companies.
All Tory donors. The reality is they would probably be New Labour donors if we had New Labour get into power. Like these construction companies. That's just how they're. Of course they are. They're run by a rich guy, and a rich guy's obviously going to donate to the Tories.
Yeah,
it'd be wonderful to completely create a new construction industry from thin air. But the reality is we can't do that. That's just not possible. Not in the time that we need to kind of be delivering this infrastructure. Transport is the UK's largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. We need and the TUC have just published, the Trade Union Congress have just published a really good report that's well worth flicking through, talking about what change we need to the number of people who currently drive who need to be in public transport. We're talking about doubling the number of people who take trains by, I used to say by 2050, but the TUC report is saying by 2030, 2034 to meet the government's own net zero targets. This is critical stuff. HS2, if it was delivered as it was supposed to be, without an intransigent government who hates delivering infrastructure, it could have been delivered in full by that point, at which point we could have been reaping the benefits of the main point of HS2. And I will now explain what HS2 is about, because there'll be plenty of people listening to this who perhaps don't know. The best way I explain this is the same way that I've convinced lots of people, including various journalists, which is I told them to go and stand at their local station during rush hour. That's on like the West Coast Main Line. So I sent Helen Pidd out from the Guardian to the shout out to anyone who is good at the Guardian. You're few and far between.
To get some
all of the turfs.
To get some delicious pizza, I assume that's what you sent her out for.
Yes, that's right. Helen Pidd, I sent her out to the station near her at rush hour and told her to count how many trains whizzed through without stopping and count how many trains actually stopped and let people on. And she phoned me back afterwards and said, yes, okay, I get it. Because this is what HS2 is about. Local stations that cannot have a good service because they have to have a huge load of gaps in the timetable to allow the non-stop trains on their way to London or on their way, basically all the long-distance services, non-stop trains, to whiz through. Because if you have a 125-mile-an-hour train, in order so that it doesn't catch up with a stopping train ahead of it, you have to leave a huge gap in the timetable, and you can't have many of those stopping trains because, for the most part, you have to flight a load of non-stop trains through. So if you want to do both, having non-stop and stopping services, you have huge gaps in the timetable, which means you don't have much. You can't. It's very difficult to drip the capacity out of the line that you really want to get by what HS2 does, which is taking the long-distance service, plonk it in on its own lines, and allowing the existing network, all those trains, to bunch up much more closely together, much more of a conveyor belt, which gives you an enormous leap in capacity. So whereas you might have 14 trains whizzing through without stopping at your local station, and maybe one rattly old sprinter pulls up, at peak time, you can have every single one of those and more, because you can actually squeeze the slightly slower trains close together. You can have many more trains actually stopping and serving those local stations, which is where people actually live and are able to get into the centre. And then maybe if they want to travel further, they can then hop on the longer distance service via HS2. So HS2 is all about local and a suburban capacity.
You hear that, David? Sorry, you hear that, David? More sprinters for you.
Hooray! That's it. That's what it's all about. So the HS2 is all about relieving the capacity so we can have more suburban rail capacity, because that's the capacity that we do. That's the capacity that gets people out of the cars. The fast services are great for all sorts of reasons, students, holiday makers, whatever it is, me going up to see friends or family, or me going down to see family in London, or whatever it happens to be. I'm in Europe. That's good and all fine, but in order to get those long distance journeys, ideally to obliterate the domestic air market, you need to have both more capacity on long distance are great. You need the journey time, so that justifies continuing to have the fast trains. So you can't just get rid of the fast trains. You need to have the fast trains to obliterate the domestic air market. But in order to get people out of their cars for those local journeys, you need more local capacity. And that's before we get on to talking about freight trains, of course, as well. So that's what HS2 is about. We need HS2. And we need a thing like HS2. And HS2 is the current vehicle we have to deliver that, the high-speed rail in the country. If we cancel HS2, as the Green Party would want us to do, to come up with their magical alternative that somehow doesn't cut down any trees, that project is never coming back. We're never having high-speed rail in the country.
No, there is a really simple way to cut this Gordian knot, and it's just you have passengers get on the freight trains. Job done. You see a freight train pull up at the station, and you just feel that urge.
Just get onto it. Yeah.
Imagine what we could we could have a whole society of we could bring back the American 1920s rail hobo. We could just have people riding the caboose. That would be amazing.
Up into half-filled boxcars.
The great hoboification of Britain. Yeah. Make it happen.
What we need to invent is the passenger railgun.
Yes.
I mean, in a way, is not an electrical train going at 300, 400 kilometers an hour something akin to that?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think it's a good, I want a future where people. I don't think we should be diminishing the amount of people move around and see each other and hang out and share experiences, because that's the way we make society better. So I think it's good for us to have electric trains. And it's good for us to have electric high-speed trains.
Yeah, but the man doesn't want that though because of the 15-minute cities. I heard it on Facebook.
That's it. Yeah. Facebook have told us that we this is it. Well, I mean, it's from a similar place, isn't it? A lot of the opposition, and there's, it's interesting. Yeah, you talk about the money side of HS2. So, firstly, the HS2's budget has increased since the first number that came out, the 30 billion-ish number. Which
that was always horseshit.
Exactly. It was always a horseshit number. The first actual budget was 56 billion, and the reality is, it's not really gone up much since then. If you kind of account for inflation, it's increased by 15-20%, which is kind of okay. That for a big civilization,
for a big project.
Yeah, exactly. This is insane. I mean, there are reasons Britain's useless at delivering big infrastructure projects. The first thing is that, again, we're delivering this as one. So, okay, let's talk about cost. I'm bouncing around here, but just interrupt me when you want to. Let's talk about cost, because it does come up. Why is HS2 that much more expensive per mile than other lines in other parts of the world, right? Even when you kind of normalise a bit for land value and stuff. Well, the reason for that is because HS2 high-speed lines everywhere else, particularly in Europe, but generally everywhere else, the high-speed line refers to the line where it comes off the existing railway network, is basically just a bypass and then rejoins the existing railway network. It doesn't include the expensive bits where it comes into a city. It doesn't include massive new inner city stations. It's just basically the rural bypass bit.
Yeah.
So that's obviously a lot cheaper, right?
I was going to say, especially if you're going through Britain, which is
much more compressed.
Everything's really it's relatively densely populated compared to lots of places that have built loads of high-speed rails. Everyone, a bunch of rich cunts own all the places that you want to put the rails through.
So I'm going to segue myself here. So there's often discussions about four-tracking the lines out of Leeds Station, right? So four-tracking the lines out of Leeds Station towards York, which is heavily constrained capacity-wise. And the reason that everyone hesitates is because it would cost billions, because every building along that bit of wibbly Marsh Lane Viaduct that wibbles along before it goes into the cutting and then there's a big depot. That bit, anyone from the northeast or from Leeds knows exactly which bit of rail. That's right, yeah, I'm looking at you. Knows exactly which bit of rail I'm talking about. One guy owns all the buildings along that viaduct. And it's the railway's we just can't countenance any engineering through there because that guy.
Wow, this is literally the plot of a season of Justified. Weird that
you said you weren't going to talk about Justified.
It was never going to happen.
No. So that's
resetting the counter from 0 to 0.
Yeah, that's it. Days since Justified discussion. The fact that we've got this, that's an example of why it costs more, because HS2 per mile cost includes very expensive tunnelled city access plus several massive brand new inner city stations, which are multi-billion pound projects. The way this should have been delivered is that you don't just say one big project with the name HS2 slapped on it. You go, strategically, Britain's rail network should look like this, and we need to deliver all of these bits of jigsaw piece to build it. And each of them can be its own self-contained, therefore more easy to manage project. No, we don't do that in Britain. We don't have any. You cannot have a plan. You can't have a strategy. You have to just have one big project that you throw all the eggs into, and when the basket falls over, bursts into flames, and sets fire to someone else's house, you just go, oh well, we couldn't have done it any differently. This is just
where the fuck did we get these eggs from?
Yeah, where did these eggs come from? Why is it? Yeah, exactly. So that's the number one thing. The second thing is that we just don't do any of this stuff anyway. Britain is a low investment, low commitment country. Like we don't invest in anything, and then when we do invest in it, we then decide we're not going to anyway. So with like the Treasury, and this is why I say we have to abolish the Treasury.
Yes, we
Treasury
do.
Brain
100%.
just absolutely
we have to like or like we have to like Clockwork Orange the whole of the Treasury. 100%.
Oh, absolutely. Like I am of the opinion. I'm all for repurposing and reducing carbon emissions with architecture, but I would make an exception for the building the Treasury are in. Atomize that fucking building. Like honestly, turn it into sand. Anyway, the third thing is that we come back to the construction industry. So the third thing that makes HS2 expensive, and also means that we just screw up these big projects, is the fact that we have such a fragmented construction industry. We have a very high reliance on SMEs, like small medium enterprises, rather than where, like, if you're in Italy or in France or in Germany, it's just kind of one contractor.
Yeah,
they have a few contractors, but the contractor is just the contractor. Yeah. They don't outsource. They don't have like an enormous like kind of quantum computer fractals worth of outsourced bits. You know, just if you're the guy who does the ecology surveys or the person who does the tunneling it's just that it's in that company. That company employs everyone who does the stuff. Whereas in the UK, you might have one of the big contractors, but they have 2,000 subcontractors or something like that.
None of whom can talk to each other.
All the extra accountants.
None of whom can talk to each other. There's constant confusion, just like endless project management costs.
All the project managers that have to deal with all that, yeah, exactly. Just enormous, just enormously wasteful. So that's the reason why we screw this stuff up. It's the fact that we are obsessed with big projects instead of strategic programs. It's the fact that we're a low investment, low commitment country. It's the fact that we have this high fragmentation kind of within the construction industry. So that's kind of why it's such a mess. But we do still need it. The reality is we kind of have to push through. The only way we make all those theory things better is by doing the thing. It's by doing more of these things so that our industry can get better at it. Because it's only by doing the repeated work that our engineers and our engineering kind of support staff, the commercial staff, the project management staff, can get better at it.
I'm sorry, Gareth, but like that is just fundamentally un-British. The way we do things
is we
spend humongous sums on something that may or may not be a boondoggle, and then we just instantly just disintegrate all of the institutions that were able to even consider carrying out that project. Like whether it be nuclear power, whether it be the railways,
the Ajax,
any other sort of
the nuclear power is a perfect example, isn't it? Where we delivered Sizewell B pretty damn well efficiently. It was good.
Well, I don't need that shit anymore.
And then
we built it.
And then we decided, no, that's it. Let's just stop now. We don't need to just have a rolling program of building power stations and then therefore renewing them and going back. And no, what we're going to do is give up on that entirely. And then we're going to go to the French and we're going to just buy new power stations with much worse technology from EDF. And it's going to be unbelievably eye-wateringly expensive, where previously Sizewell B was producing the cheapest electricity Britain has ever seen. Brilliant. Yeah, so we are very good at that sort of thing, it's true.
I cannot believe that you're talking Britain down over its French reactors.
Anyway, so where were we? Yeah, there we go. I've ranted about a variety of things there.
Yeah, no. It's very good. So, like, I mean, the thing that I'm like, I want to get onto like what the perspectives are for like this thing ever being finished, for example, because again, our friends at the NEL had some really darkly amusing things to say about that. But like for me, the first thing, because I remember when we were doing the episode on the West Coast Main Line, is like the services on that's Avanti West Coast, and it's like I think they are also already like contracted out to like run these trains and run the services. So like I'm already like, well, that's whatever ends up happening with like the actual infrastructure and the trains and what the stations and all that stuff. It's like, no, it's going to be dog shit again because these fucking people are involved again.
So yeah, it's interesting. And in terms of the operation, because the franchise system that operation was sort of set up under has collapsed, completely disintegrated. And I've taught people can go and here's my early plug. People can go listen to Railnatter to understand why that is, or anything I've talked about previously on any other podcast where I've talked about this stuff or written about it at length. Like the reason why that franchise system has collapsed in itself. So I don't even know if that contract really will stand by the time HS2 is coming around.
Yeah, fair enough.
We're going to be in a very different, and this is part of it. I often find myself having this argument with people about HS2 on when they say, oh, well, it's going to be run by private operators and blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, I mean, yes, if it will be if you have that attitude. The reality is that HS2 is going to be opening in a very different situation. Britain's going to be having 1 or 2 weeks of 40-degree days. The country's going to be absolutely fucked by climate change by that point, and we're just going to, the flooding will have potentially written off parts of the country. Coastlines will be eroding more rapidly. There's going to be some fairly apocalyptic stuff happening by the mid-2030s. So we're going to be in a very, very different situation. I would hope that politically we will have caught up by that point, because if not, then we're fucked. But you have to think optimistically. The fact that we're going to be in a very different situation. Avanti is, as a name, probably won't exist by then. It'll probably be it's one of the last train operators that hasn't just been given a generic geographical name. So I think Avanti will end up getting gobbled up, and they'll just they'll call it West Coast.
But I mean, as long as it's the same, incompetence and sadists behind it, the name change it's like the least of my worries.
Of course, the main problem at the moment is that most of the problems now are not really related to the private company at all, because they're just essentially running it as a concession. So most of the problems are at the door of the DFT anyway now, because it's so because everything is, I say DFT. The DFT is basically a lengthy corridor between Treasury and the railways. So with one desk in it, it's one really put upon guy.
I feel like a more apt descriptor would be a road, because that's all they fucking care about.
Yes. It would certainly have been road surface with tarmac, for sure. Treasury basically, and this is true for the current railway at the moment. They're asset stripping. They're not asset stripping it. They're just stripping it. They're just stripping it apart. They are, as best as they can, destroying the railways. They're stripping funding from the infrastructure maintainer, manager, Network Rail. They have told all the train operators to cut their budgets by 10 to 20%. They're just stripping. In some places, the timetable is still 50% of pre-COVID levels. So half the number of trains are running still. And by the way, we still have 90 to 100% of pre-COVID levels of rail ridership. So people are desperate to get back on the train, more than ever before, in fact. And yet the government is just, we've had this about face. What was previously a kind of cross-party consensus that trains were a good idea has been completely obliterated because Treasury got so much, and it's basically entirely because of the amount of power that Treasury got during the COVID pandemic. So that's pretty frightening. So all the franchises have collapsed anyway. So who actually ends up running the HS2 trains is anyone's guess, because part of the reason the franchise system collapsed is because no companies were bidding for the franchises anyway. I have a sneaking suspicion, if Stagecoach get kicked off Avanti, that we will fuck you to all of the Scottish bus barons. First group, Stagecoach. Yes. You suck.
Yes. We also did an episode on buses. Fuck all those people, 100%.
McGill's and all get fucked.
But even the reality is, Stagecoach probably are not going to touch the railways with a barge pole after that. I just don't think any company is going to pick it up. So the irony of the government kind of changing the structure of the railways at the moment and saying, there'll still be private companies involved. The only reason that private companies part of the reason they haven't changed the structure is because private companies will not get involved unless they just have basically a guaranteed income. Which is what the restructure will give. Whereas previously it kind of didn't provide them that, and some of the companies were in a sort of strange roundabout way, were kind of losing money on running the system because it was collapsing so much. But anyway, we've digressed into current state of the railways.
It is always fun to hear about. Trains are so good at pretty much, moving people around, which is fundamentally basis for the entire economy, other than the shitty houses.
We want our health. We want shelter, and then we want mobility. It's a fundamental thing. It's an innate desire of humanity, right?
Even in spite of just completely fucking the whole system up by privatizing that shit, trains are still doing the job that they are born to do.
And it's I like this. It comes back to an interesting point that I like to make, and I actually said it to a top boss rail manager who took great umbrage with it recently. And sorry, but she was wrong. The reason that the reason the railway is fucked is the same reason the railway is still working, which is that it's incentives. It's all about incentives. It's all about the mission. The overall railway's current objective is run yourself more efficiently somehow. That is an impossible target to measure against, and therefore the industry is flailing around and has no idea what it's doing. Whereas frontline staff's mission is keep the trains running. Frontline staff's mission is get passengers on trains, keep the freight running, and therefore we're doing that very well. despite generally, because as I say, 90 to 100% of pre-COVID levels, despite the timetable being less than that, so we're running fewer trains, and yet we have as many passengers as we had before COVID.
I do also like this oxymoronic take that in order to run a train, like a railway, efficiently, you have less people using it on the one method of transportation that becomes more efficient the more people use it.
Correct. Yes.
I mean, I say again, I live in Switzerland, and it's like you're on the rail there, and there's like trains every 5 seconds. They're fast, they're clean, there's seats, it works. There's staff, there's everything works like a Swiss fucking watch. And then I come to the UK, and I just have to take the train up to go see my parents-in-law, my dad-in-law, and it's just every time I sit on that fucking train, I'm like, why haven't you people started why haven't the red banners been raised essentially just over the state of the railway alone? I still don't get it.
It's a classic example of Britain's failed democracy, because the reality is that the arguments over nationalisation are a bit of a red herring, because bringing it under state, the reality is that the railways are under more centralised state control than they've ever been in their history.
Yes,
right.
It's a facade of privatisation, essentially.
There's a complicated discussion to have about. I don't think there's the discussion. Yes, there's no need for private companies to be involved in running the top level train companies. It's just obviously because by the time you push them to the point where you have a private operator in the structure that's being proposed, it's there's no point to them. All you're doing is employing a separate company with a bunch of separate lawyers and accountants. Just get rid of the lawyers and accountants and make them all in-house.
And so building in a profit just for the sake of
it. Of saying that it's a private railway organization. Exactly. So obviously that's stupid. But the reality is that that's basically the situation we're in now, and most of the problems we have in the railway are government problems, and it's problems from Treasury, it's problems from government control, it's problems from the fact that there is absolutely no plan for what the railways are supposed to do. Fixing that requires a strategy, it requires a plan, requires the abolition of the Treasury, and it's interesting that but people want that to happen. There's incredible popular support for the railways, for just getting private companies off the railways, for having them as a state's kind of concern. Incredible popular support for that as a policy, and yet it is considered to be a no-go policy for Britain's ostensibly socialist.
Right. I want to briefly drag us back into the world of HS2, because we can talk.
Yes.
Because we can talk about forever about why trains are super cool and we should have more of them. Because that's just a fundamental.
I'll bring
truth
it back
of life.
when we can talk at length about trains things. But anyway,
sure. I just wanted to
laser focus back on that.
Yeah, it's basically again, our good friends at the National Audit Office is they were already saying well, maybe the line to Crewe will be open by 2036, and their estimate is Manchester, the connection up to Manchester by 2043, and it's do you want to take a wild punt at A, whether this thing will ever get done, and B, when it'll be done, or are you just nah, the NEO has this about spot on? Because they're never wrong. I want to say that up front. We hear our stands of the NAO.
NEO stands, yeah. I think they're probably a little optimistic. At current trajectory, I would say they're a little optimistic. I'd say at the current trajectory, we won't see. I mean, firstly, what's currently left of HS2 is a largely useless husk anyway. That doesn't mean we shouldn't build it, because, as I said, that is the bit that you then add the other stuff onto to make it work again. Yeah. You're not going to dig it up and then rebuild it in the same place when you come back to later. So build it, yes, but with the government's current deep desire to simply not build it, it will, and the risk that I have the only ray of hope with the current Labour Party for me right now is its Transport Secretary, Shadow Transport Secretary Louise Haig is actually good.
Yes, she seems to be very good at her job.
So
they also
Louise
seem
Haig
to
is,
be
and she was excellent at Northern Irish Secretary. So I have some optimism about Louise as a Transport Secretary. Absolutely 100% guarantee she'll get reshuffled out of there before the next general election.
Yes, which
will be very annoying. Yeah. And then we'll be back to no hope whatsoever.
You want to do something good? Fuck you! You're out of the party.
Oh no, it's really funny actually. Every time Louise Haig says something good, like we should nationalise railways, literally 5 minutes later, Rachel Reeves is running into a studio, panting, and we're like, actually, we don't know if we can afford this.
Yeah, exactly. So I have 15% hope there, but it has to the next government has to pick it up and has to champion it as a project, as part of the big picture, as part of the growth agenda, whatever stupid platitude they want to call it. But this has to be the jewel in the crown, because without it, Britain is absolutely fucked for a variety of reasons. But like, this is a core reason for it, because it represents the fact, if you ask why Britain's economy is screwed, a lot of that is because we rely entirely on London, and all the other cities are basically treated like provincial villages. Like, if you want a city to function like London, build it with transport infrastructure like London has. They might start functioning like London. It's not rocket science. It just requires a bit of imagination.
I think
and
you'll
HS2
find,
is a key part of that, because, as I say, it's unlocking that suburban capacity.
Gareth, I think you'll find actually is that the real people of Britain live in towns, not cities. So I think so just before
so we need to build HS2 along the ley lines in order for them to actually work. Exactly. We need to have the Druidic Circle of Britain take over management of HS2. I think that's a realistic answer. They can't do a worse job.
But
they're genuinely true. I would actually quite like to see HS2 delivered by druids. That could be quite good. If you got thing is, let's go full blast and just like get the Gauls to deliver it. Can you imagine like Obelix building HS2? He'd be fucking slamming bridge piers in that. There's no tomorrow. Great.
Yeah,
finally getting the upgrade to the Glasgow subway for the inner circle, outer circle, and Druidic circle.
The whole of Britain is connected by high-speed rail, except one small village in the Cotswolds that's still holding out. Yeah,
that's it.
But in a
that one small village has like a tiny high-speed rail just for bees on the windowsill.
Like the little Richie Rich inside the mansion little railway. I like that. That's very adorable. But anyway, if we, let's presuppose that we do raise the red banners, and you are our transport commissar. Like, what would it take to like fix or like slightly unfuck the current project?
So first example,
let's
jump to Euston. Yeah. So money. Money is what, as all of us believe here, like money is merely like a representation of the favours that we do for each other. And when you big that to a country level, like the reality is, it's the resources that are the constraint. The Treasury could write a blank cheque tomorrow, and we wouldn't be able to deliver anything much quicker than we are now anyway, because our industries are so fucked anyway. So let's take Euston as a good example, as a little microcosm of what you need to do to get Euston sorted. The first thing you do is kick Lend-Lease off the site. So the big developer who wants to build he wants to basically turn Euston Station into Birmingham New Street Station and put a load of oversight development on it, kick them off the site. Just get rid of them. Get shot of them. So that only railway people and the local authority, Camden and TfL, actually are the ones in charge of speccing the project.
Only people who have ever seen a railway before.
Correct, yes. So get rid of Lend-Lease, sack them off. That's the first, and that would enable you to actually start speccing the thing. The second thing to do is, like on a similar level but nationally, is work out what the fuck the railway is supposed to be for, and how does it fit into that picture. Because only when you work out what it's for can everyone agree on the specification. Ideally, just pick up the 2016 specification and run with that again, because then we've got all the designs, and you can kind of then just start kind of developing those into being ready to build. That was the right plan then. The plans that we have now are dog shit. So go back to the 2016 Y, go back to the pre-integrated rail plan proposals, build Euston as it was supposed to be as 2 stages, stick to that plan, and then we might have a chance of building it. But stop bloody reviewing it and thinking that things are going to change your mind, and also stop like basically hanging a big massive sword above everyone's head on the project, saying, oh, we might chop this, we might chop that, because it makes all the decisions about stupid cost cutting and not how does this thing fit into the bigger transport strategy. And that really comes to the bottom of it, is yet again, it's the impossible thing that Britain cannot do, which is plan for the future. If we plan for the future, we'd be able to deliver this stuff because we'd know how.
Yeah, but then we might have to admit that there is such a thing as the future, and then things could be very scary.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes to other things like the wizard will fix it theory that Britain has about its own future, of like transport emissions, as I've said, are like the majority of that is from road traffic, and EV sales are not going to be steep enough. Most cars on the road, when HS2 opens in 2056 or whatever it's going to be, like most most car sales will still be, or most cars on the road, will still be petrol and diesel cars.
Yeah.
EV sales are not quick enough.
No.
EVs also do not solve most of the problems. In fact, EVs only solve one problem, which is tailpipe emissions. That's the only thing that electric vehicles solve. The government has put all of its eggs in the electric. We picked up all the eggs that we set fire to earlier. We put them in a different basket now. The government's put all of its
This is my basket of slightly charred
eggs.
eggs.
We've
taken the burning eggs, put them in a basket with a bunch of batteries in them, and assumed this is going to solve the problem.
And we're going to push that down a jetty into the sea.
Where all the batteries rightly belong. Yeah,
where all the batteries should be in the sea. Yeah. So just thinking about increasing piles of batteries and slightly charred eggs piling up into the sea. Anyway, there's an image that's difficult to shake. Yes, the government's put all its eggs in the electric vehicle basket, and the reality is that they're going to be sorely disappointed if they think that's going to solve carbon emissions, because it ain't. The reality is that we need a lot more rail, and the only thing that can unlock the capacity to deliver those sorts of carbon emission savings is not like incremental online upgrades, because those, if you try and run more fast trains in the existing network, all you do is reduce the number of local trains, which reduces the number of cars, which increases the number of cars on the road, because the local trains are the ones that get people out of the cars. So it has to be rail. Rail has to be the backbone. And it also, I'm not an anti-bus person. Buses are critical, absolutely critical. We have to re-regulate buses, by the way. That's a critical thing we need to do. Bring the buses back to us.
I mean, that's like the last leg part of the journey, right?
Exactly. So you have to have a single unified system of integrated transport. And that involves, you need more buses. But buses are basically quite easy because you just buy the bus. Right, that is fairly straightforward.
What we have to do is partner the UK officially with those little electric scooters, and then I'm sure it'll be done.
No, what you need to do is you need to go to the Treasury and say, imagine a road. Now, imagine this road went up and down the country with very, very fast cars on them. Now,
you could even do it in like Clarkson voice if you really want to. Very fast cars.
Yes. That's it, yeah. So, like HS2 is a critical part of our future. We have to deliver it. And the NAO are pretty bob on with how pessimistic their thoughts are on when it actually is going to get delivered. And we have to deliver it sooner than that. We need to be... The painful thing was that the 2020s was the decade that Britain had to build all of its shit that it needed to get everything working. Renewable energy, nuclear, and rail capacity upgrades. And at the rate we're going right now, is Hinkley going to be open by the end of this decade?
Century probably would have been a correct question.
Yeah, maybe by the end of the century.
I mean, like Britain fundamentally is a country that hates doing things, so
yes,
it is a big ask.
Doing something means that something real might exist, and it's really important that we have to remember that Britain is not a real thing. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, if we start doing things that solve any problems, then people will start saying, "Hey, what about these other problems? Is there something we could do about that?" And then your hands start to become more and more tightly bound because you're going to have to start saying yes to more and more of these problems, and we can't be having that because that might mean that things could actually improve.
The fundamental thing with the UK is like it's not a real country, but it can definitely hurt you. Like it's a paradox.
Yes, exactly. But it's gaslighting, but turned into a country. It's not
Britain is in the room with you right now. Fucking watch out.
Exactly. Like over the last sort of jump back to say the 60s. Back to when local authorities had a lot more power and had enough power to actually build big infrastructure. It's a reminder that our motorway network was built, much as it is a bad thing, our motorway network was built not by national government, but by our local authorities. Can you imagine local authorities having that much spending power? Well, we should be devolving that power back to them, because the only way we're going to build out the infrastructure is by devolving power desperately away from the Treasury, basically. But the government has not spent... Compared to our other stupid G7 neighbours, if we're going to use the G7 as a way to categorise countries, but compared to those kind of high-performing economies, Britain has spent hundreds of billions of pounds less on infrastructure. Like hundreds of billions of pounds less over successive decades. So there's an enormous infrastructure deficit. And the fact that you go to any city outside of London, it's like this: they have no proper dedicated mass transit systems. Oh, they've got trams that they call a metro. Like, we've got the West Midlands Metro. No, it's a tram, folks. It's just a tram. You're getting excited about a thing that has existed for like 150 years. In fact, we've had trams for longer than we've had railways, for fuck's sake. Don't get excited about it and don't call it a metro. Birmingham needs an actual metro. Just like Leeds does, just like Manchester does, just like South Hampshire should. Like, these places all merit having a proper, actual, dedicated metro system, like they would if this was Italy or France or Germany.
Well,
anyway,
in short, before we move to comment or commentariat, we once again reiterate our call to President Xi to come and save us, because we desperately yearn for freedom and also public high speed and local public transport. Anyway, David, before we wrap up, shall we play a quick round of comment or commentariat?
Yes, we will. So
wait, Gareth, you are familiar with the game, right? Because just to double check.
Nope, and I'm looking forward to winging it massively.
No, that's fine. I'll very quickly explain. It's very, very simple. I will read you something out. You will tell me if it was a comment on a news website or something written by the cunt in the commentariat on that news website. The winner is anyone who didn't take a guest spot on this podcast and doesn't have to do this, so my friends would have lost. Okay. But for all this, a minority of Britons will spend this weekend carping from the sidelines. Some will make it to Whitehall and the Mall to unfurl their Not My King banners. Predictably, the BBC has said it will include anti-royalist opinions. It is always into balance when it comes to views which chime with the metropolitan left, although less so on other occasions. Can you imagine the BBC including an opponent of gay marriage in Pride coverage? Comment or commentariat?
Commentariat. And I think I know who wrote it as well.
Ooh.
Oh, we got another person who knows stuff on the podcast. It's just ruined the game.
Well, this is his, and on his once and only appearance. Thank you, Gareth, for coming by. No, I think this is commentariat as well.
I'm going to say comment just to be contrarian.
Excellent. It has not paid off in this case. That was Ross Clark in The Express.
Oh, damn, it was Ross Clark. I was going to say it was Brendan O'Neill. That was reading so Brendan O'Neill.
Oh
Everyone
my God.
is always going to say it was Brendan O'Neill, to be fair. Like.
The thing is, when we get an actual Brendan article, it's so fucking bonkers that he somehow just slides under the radar.
Twisted parodies. So many. The thing is, unfortunately, and this is too much cross podcast seeding here, but my brain has been turned to mulch by Milo's versions of Brendan O'Neill pieces, which means that
Milo's are
I was expecting
good,
you to say, and that was 1984. Sort of ending.
I mean, Milo's versions are like incredibly good, but they're not as good as the last thing we read from Brendan about like how we are no longer superior to the animals, but must bow down to the God machine. That was the most incredible thing he's ever written.
Yeah, that was really fucking top-notch shit. Right, next one. There are a fair few things I'd like to see King Charles apologise for. Those meddlesome, spidery letters he wrote to government ministers, his green doom and gloom, Prince Harry. But slavery? The British Empire? No, never.
Prince Harry.
Charles should utter not one word of contrition for these historical events, for if even he, the literal king, were to cave to the woke insistence that the privileged must self-flagellate for the crimes of their forefathers, it would set a terrible precedent. It would represent... At the
start of that, I was going to say comment, but at the end of it, commentariat.
Oh, not finished. It would represent the final victory of that jealous god of identity politics with disastrous consequences for democracy. Comment or commentary.
I'm going to change my Twitter handle to jealous god of what was it again? The jealous god of
the jealous god of identity politics.
Yeah, that's. I'm going to change my Twitter handle. I'll be right back.
Yeah, that's Slanish, I think.
Yeah. That's commentariat, I think. That sounds like Leo McKinstry.
That's so full of itself. It has to be fucking commentariat.
Okay, Gareth.
Yeah, I'm going to go... at the start, I was thinking comment. The middle, commentariat. The last line made me think back to comment again, but I'm going to go with commentariat. It's like a Starkey level kind of... anyway, commentariat.
That was commentariat. It was Brendan O'Neill in Spike.
Yes! Oh.
It was. Brendan is here. Here he is. Okay, right. Yeah.
This next one, actually, I'm going to save that one. I'll save that one. That's the last one. In Moscow today, the Muscovites were treated to sinister displays of military hardware. The warning ramblings of a tyrant... Sorry.
Is this Mike Gapes?
The warring ramblings of a tyrant who has stolen everything from them, and the terrified, stony-faced, sheep-like massing of silent Russians whose every compliance with state diktats is a given. There was notably no yellow-clad cabal of demonstrators chanting "Not my president." So, you joyless Republicans, be careful what you wish for. When you take something away from people, they tend to fill that void with something else, and it is rarely a happy trade. Comment or commentariat?
Yes! That's
commentariat.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, commentariat.
Comment.
Mike Gapes commentariat.
I'd genuinely be... I'd be like, Caitlin Moran wrote that.
That was commentariat. That was from an article in the Express titled, "So was it Putin or was it his double in Red Square? You decide," says Paul Baldwin.
Baldwin by name, Baldwin by nature, yes.
Yeah.
Right, one last one to round us off. The cult of the dog has gone too far.
Okay, stop, we're done. Pack your bags, everybody, go home.
Can't go for a walk in our local park as it is now a dog toilet, with self-entitled owners telling you that their dog running at you and jumping up is only its right. And restaurants are also a no-go area for those of us who wish to eat in a hygienic environment. Last week, a chap had his dog sit up on the bus seat. Filthy animal sitting where my coat might sit. Hotel bedrooms are now unclean as dogs are allowed in to lounge on the bed and lick themselves where I might want to sleep. Comment or commentary?
Wait, David, can you hold on a second? I'm going to put my headphones on my dog, and then if you can read it again, and then we'll see.
Commentariat.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
If it's not commentariat, then they need to change careers immediately.
Yes,
I'm gonna say comment because we've had a lot of commentariat so far.
Yeah, play the numbers.
That's a dangerous way to play this game.
Yeah, that is true. But commentariat.
Yep, it was a comment. That was a comment in the Daily Mail.
Oh my god. We're all dog cultists now.
This was in response to a Richard Littlejohn article about the idea of workplaces providing doggy daycare to try and coax people back into the office.
I'm assuming he was in favour, the fat cunt.
No. He thinks it's woke nonsense.
Really, that surprises me. He's always so open to self-improvement and people having a better work-life balance.
Yeah, of course he is. That's why he lives in Florida and works from home.
I forgot about that.
So yeah. Anyway, that was comment or commentariat, and that was the episode. So, Gareth, thank you very much for coming on. It's been illuminating, and we'll definitely have you back to talk about more rail shit in the future. Is there anything you would like to plug?
Yeah, listen to Railnatter tomorrow night, in fact, on YouTube and on all good podcasting platforms about a week later when I get around to taking the YouTube audio and putting it on Podbean. And on Twitter and whatever. That's been an absolute pleasure. That was the usual. If you like my chaotic ADHD-fueled ramblings that go in all directions, then you can get more of that on Twitter and on all sorts of other places too.
Highly recommend. Definitely should. Okay, from us, it's the usual stuff. We have bonus episodes available, patreon.com/praxiscast. You can buy merch at praxiscast.tmail.com. You can also see Twitch streams. They are Wednesdays and Thursdays. That is twitch.tv/praxiscast.
Where we bring our own brand of ADHD madness.
Yeah. It fuels us all. And that's it. So I think we'll call it a night there. And again, thank you, Gareth, and see you all later.
Yeah, bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Cheers.